Alvarado. That's Caleb Carter. This is our weekly YouTube show. Caleb, what's the first MAC football game you've ever been to?
Before I went to Ohio University. Gosh, you know what, Alex? I think we're going to have to do it. It's not as fresh in my memory as it might be for you. What about you? Do you remember off the top of your head? I have to look it up.
The first first college football game I ever went to did involve some action. It was my freshman year of high school, 2006. Sorry to make some of you feel old if that's, just how you are. Sorry, I'm just 28. 2006 was my first college football game, and my uncles took me to the Motor City Bowl. And guess who I was rooting for? Dan Lefevre in his freshman year.
I mean, it was a pretty prolific offense. At least it was entertaining.
It was fun as hell. Yeah, he was throwing the ball, running the ball, doing stuff.
At that age, that's all we wanted from our quarterbacks, wasn't it? Somebody who would throw and run, just incredible. The likes of which we've never seen. And yet,
who doesn't love a quarterback named Dan?
The man. Listen, as somebody from Detroit, I feel like you should know somebody you don't know named that you don't like named Dan. So I'm remembering now. So it was New Mexico State. Ohio hosted New Mexico State. So looking up the date, September 8th, 2012. Ohio beat New Mexico State 51-24. There were about 26,000 people in the stands. Ohio could get pretty high up there early in the season before everybody left at halftime to go to the bars. The start of that season was fun as an Ohio football fan, and then November happened, as it tends to,
Always does.
I know about that.
Hey, man, November, it gets to the best of us. Hey, speaking of the best of us, guess it's starting in 2 weeks.
Rapid testing for coronavirus.
That's right.
But, I mean, MAC football's back. It's right there. It's so close. There's previews every day. There's, I'm seeing, team Twitter accounts posting stuff about the position groups and whatever beat writers there are left among the sports journal choir folks that we've talked about that has been depleted in recent years. They're writing stuff. We had Nick on the podcast from the Toledo Blade talking about BG
Again,
last
not
week.
a podcast.
I'm going to continue to call it a podcast. It's just going to keep happening. We'll get to episode 27 or something, and then I'll not call it that. Sound good?
You'll be like, we have a YouTube channel this whole time? Subscribe to us on the YouTube. Follow us on Twitter. The Mid-American Conference. 2 weeks. The season's about to start. ESPN figured their stuff out with the Big Ten. That means back time.
Time to do the less important.
Yeah.
Let's
all
go.
right. Time to give me them crumbs, baby. Give me them crumbs. You don't want the sandwich. You just want the leftovers.
Hey, man, we see the dedicated MAC fans on Twitter going, hey, when are you going to give us Tuesday Night Football? We need it. We need to know.
When are you going to open them wallets and give it to ESPN Plus? Ooh.
I mean, I just paid for ESPN Plus again, so obviously I'm desperate for something.
You think I'm kidding about ESPN Plus, but day after Election Day, you're going to have to fire up that ESPN Plus account.
You're going to need it.
We've got one game on the ESPN Plus, and by we, I mean the people that follow me, Eastern fans.
Pretty exciting opener.
Oh, sorry. I have the rundown up here on my end. I've got, the Max press release with all the schedules, with the new times and the channels that you're going to be finding these at. You're going to, unfortunately, even though that we're watching it on Wednesday night when there's, NBA's done. Let's see, the NFL is not really playing on a Wednesday. Shit. Because I said that, the NFL is going to play on a Wednesday.
Yeah. Play a makeup game on that day, probably.
Yeah. There's a lot of, a lot of open spots on the main networks, but sometimes they get clogged up by, oh, look at that. Ohio Central is going to be on ESPN proper. Oh, look at that. Buffalo NIU is going to be on ESPN2. Oh, look at that.
Hell yeah. Give us that shine. Give us that shitty MAC shine on a Tuesday night.
Rivalry is going to be on CBSSN if you get that chance.
It's not a thing. We decided that last time. That's not a thing.
Here's a late game, though. We got kickoffs at 6. We got kickoffs at 7. 8 o'clock, ESPNU, Battle by 75.
They front-loaded it so hard.
Oh, yeah. And
they're just
as it should.
Games, Tuesday. Games.
Hey, listen, we need the distraction.
True.
all day people are going to be like, what do the ballots say? Come on, we haven't finished counting these things yet. No, keep watching Maction. Stop.
No, shut up. Turn your mind off. Don't think
up.
about important things. Watch Mac football.
Shut the hell up. Jason Candle's on TV. And that's as far as they've got. That's as far as they've got. They got 2 weeks in.
Yeah.
So that's it. That's the Max got for you.
You're gonna get that. You're gonna get that cross-conference matchup real early, and so there's a lot to be excited for. Figure some things out about some teams before it all goes to hell in a handbasket. There's a lot to be excited about in the MAC West, as there is every year, right? I mean, there's I think we're looking at the MAC East. We already looked at the MAC East last week as maybe more teams could compete at the top. And, if an emergence of someone like Kent State, like we have some exciting three-team race. But for the MAC West, I mean, in a weird year, don't we think that all of them, every team in the MAC West could be competing for a title potentially?
Yeah, the MAC West, like we said, the East, in years past, the East sucked. The East was not fun to look forward to. There was only like Bowling Green, and Ohio was kind of cool. Miami never broke through yet. Bowling Green was, or not Bowling Green, but Buffalo. So the East wasn't fun until it was. The West has always been fun. Sometimes it isn't, but more often than not, it's pretty sweet.
Yeah, I mean, there's been plenty of time when NIU was like the kind of the consensus favorite and managed to rip through undefeated, but like you still had your high-scoring games in some of those years and some really good football played even in the carry years where NIU would go 7-1, 6-2, and still play at that top level, and Western's up there competing with them. Toledo's expected up there every year, and now that Central's back up playing at that level,
CMU truly did exceed some timelines.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah. Like you said, there's always something going on. There was the 1 year where we had 3 teams finish with the same record, or 4 teams in the West finished with the same 6-2 MAC record.
Right.
With all the rivalries that end up being MAC West deciding games in one way or another, like Toledo NIU was a rivalry that came organically, which I truly love. It does not need a title. It just needs to be NIU Toledo. That's it.
And NIU, and it's kind of funny that they do consider themselves rivals, but NIU absolutely hates Toledo more than Toledo hates NIU. And having covered NIU, I can tell it's very obviously skewed that way. Yeah,
and the Michigan MAC, that's kind of a lame ass trophy as it is, but the competition's always, especially with like these new coaching hires have, been fun, been more competitive, actually means something, actually close, actually surprising. The battles between Eastern, Central, Western. The Bronze Stock, apparently Ball State got a win in there last year, so that's cool. Don't really care about that one, but everything else is pretty sweet.
Gosh, what an ugly game.
So Caleb, where should we begin? Where should we begin with our MAC West previews? Let's start with the dark horse team, I guess, for some people. What?
That's a choice of words right there.
All right, so we're gonna start this whole damn thing off by looking at Twitter, right? I told the people gonna record that we're gonna record this episode, and everyone's always like, "Oh, Toledo, of course." So a few people chimed in, and we're like, "NIU, Bork, baby." JK is probably Toledo because that line and the weapons around whatever QB. I really like Plitt at Ball State as well. That offense will be fun. AF. I'm sure that means Air Force.
Sure. So they're going triple option this year. Got it. Okay.
And that's from the old Razzle Dazzler at Eric Brett. That's a good NIU. That's a good pick. Bold. Haven't really heard from that before. Ball State, because pandemic football, and why the hell not? He didn't say the hell. I said the hell. Good as reason as any, right?
I mean, no, but okay.
Steve from EMU because it's 2020, where the unpredicted can and has been happening all year. Makes as much sense as anything, I guess. Hey, can you argue with that?
If in a world where EMU football is thriving this year, how do they thrive on the chaos? What has to happen?
So EMU is not working with a team that has a lot of returning starters. Unless anything has changed, they return the lowest returning production percentage of the MAC, probably in the nation too. They were like way in the bottom of there when Bill Connolly of ESPN put out his numbers reflecting that. That's to say that, you know, a lot of these positions are kind of get a fresh slate. If you've heard me before, I've kind of criticized Eastern's running game. They get a clean slate. Like, I don't really know what to expect out of any of these running backs. I don't know what to expect out of Darius Boone or DJ Smith or Samson Evans or Jairus Grissom. Who knows? I don't really know what to expect out of the quarterback spot. You know, Preston Hutchinson, he had the one really good game. I don't know if he can be consistent, though. I've only seen him in the one game against Western. There's also rumblings that Jairus Grissom, you know, the do-it-all athlete, maybe he might slide into quarterback every once in a while. I don't really know. He's all over the place. You know, wide receivers, we're only returning 2 starters, really, Dylan Drummond and Keon Williams. Dylan Drummond is, you know, I kind of like this receiver group because they all kind of like have their own thing, right? Like Dylan Drummond is the returning all MAC possession guy, I'll say. Keon Williams can kind of like go up and get it with one hand. Hassan Badoon, he's the walk-on speedster who made his way onto the scholarship level. Jairus Grissom, who knows? He's kind of the wild card.
Guys, why aren't the brakes working?
Because I cut the brakes! Wild card, bitches! Yeah!
And CJ Parks might be the newcomer JUCO who can kind of do it all. He might be the X factor that Eastern's been missing for a while. I don't really know, but it's kind of a fun group if you look at it in that regard. Said a lot about the offense. Offensive line might be the best unit on the field for this team. The defense replaces a lot. They had to learn a lot about pretty much themselves after, you know, losing Max Crosby and a bunch of defensive linemen that were really productive for them in years past. Now they have to learn how to replace 3 multi-year all-MAC safeties. You know, they had a lot. They're missing a lot, but watching some of the guys develop over time, I kind of like who they bring into the backfield for this defensive secondary. Also, Greg Kelly, you talked to him,
right? And
they're bringing on a 25-year-old that nobody has film on.
And EMU's been good about churning out defensive talent and developing it while it's there. They get the most out of a lot of guys. We've seen that from the safeties and defensive backs group. Seen that from the defensive line. Seen that from some offensive linemen too. So no doubt they'll find some guys to really step in and be really productive.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing that I kind of want to say about Eastern, like, there's no real stat line for this at all because you can't find this out. But tell me if I'm wrong here. Is Chris Creighton the leader in, like, trick plays called in the MAC? Because to me, as someone who only watches Eastern football and 99% other MAC schools, I feel like he's leading that category in his time there. I'm just guessing. If that is the canon for the 2020 season, where there's so much unpredictability coming out of the roster, if there could be so much unpredictability coming out of the playbook as well, out of some of these players that, you know, where's Jairus Grissom going to come from? What about the Samson Evans kids that transferred from Iowa? What about these freshmen that they've been developing? What about that Greg Kelly kid that we just mentioned? So
Alex is going with they're hard to prepare for argument because even they might not know what they're going to do. And Ball State's going to be great this year. They put up some offense against Fordham, and Plitt gets to kind of go on display. The offense that they've got kind of starts to raise some eyebrows because they're putting up the types of stats that a lot of teams in the FBS did not have at that point in time. They go on the road, lose a decently close game to was it Florida Atlantic? Yeah. Then what kind of raised some eyebrows was how late into the game they were in a close contest against North Carolina State in Raleigh. And at that point, I'm kind of like, I was more impressed with them after that game than I was after anything I'd seen so far in the season. The KALEB, they come back from a 17-3 deficit to grab a win. They beat Eastern in a close game. They beat the stuffing out of Toledo. And at that point, I'm thinking, oh God, is Ball State the best team? And then, as you said, they come back, loss, close loss against Western, close loss against Central, close loss against Kent. But all of that in mind, they ended up going, they went out on to beat Miami. So I'm thinking after all of this, the types of steps that Ball State's taken in the last few years, it's not absurd at all to think that Ball State could make a run and knock off some teams early in the season this year. But like, what's kind of your take on like how they lost those games, those close games last year?
Well, normally at this time in the year, I'm like knee deep in researching or like rewatching so much of last year's football games, but because of the state of the world, I haven't done so. So I'm sorry if I don't sound too polished in here. What I do remember is that in 2 games, in 2 different halves, one of the games was against NIU, but that game was incredibly wet. And there was another Ball State game that I don't remember on, where Drew Plitt had like 0 completions.
I mean, it was probably the NIU game.
And like 4 like distinct quarters of football that I'm thinking of. You know what I mean? Like one was the NIU game. Yes, it was like the second half of that. The other one, I don't remember.
I'm looking at the thing, looking at the schedule now, and I watched some highlights earlier, and I watched Ball State against Western, and looking at how fun that offense could be from time to time, and Western came back and won that game. But I mean, Western was still a good team before they collapsed and ruined their chance. But I mean, Plitt threw for, I want to say, like, it looks like it was like 100 yards or something like that against Ohio. Maybe I'm looking at the wrong thing. But there were games where they're off when they couldn't get it going through the air. Like it was just kind of flat. There wasn't really anything there. 109 yards, 11 to 20 passing against Ohio. Ohio was, done a decent team last year with a decent defense, but they really needed, to come out with a win in a game like that. But then it's like you're playing. There's just not that much of a difference between the likes of Ball State and Toledo and Central, but yet Ball State is mollywhopping the Rockets last year and then dropping close games to the like of Kent State and Central them as well. What are we looking at schedule-wise? What are we thinking about where they can be?
At Miami, home against Eastern, home against NIU, at Toledo, at Central, and then they close the season home against Western, which has been a fun series for whatever reason lately. Tim Lester effect. We'll get to that later, I guess. I don't know. I just made that up. That's not really a thing I'm going to...
That 2018 game, I was in the office when that game was being played, and holy crap, was that some fun football to watch.
Okay, so what, 0-6? Like, their best shots are Eastern and NIU. Perhaps Toledo if they still have not, figured things out, but I don't understand why they wouldn't.
I mean, I don't think it's ludicrous to think that, like, they could steal a win from Miami to start the year. And I know, so Alex, in our first episode, picked Miami. I picked Buffalo. I think Miami is very susceptible to losing plenty of games, but also is just as talented as anybody else at some of those spots that they could just as easily be 5-1. But like a week 1 game where if somebody doesn't have it all figured out yet, or just something goes the wrong way, I mean, maybe Ball State steals a win, has a home game against Eastern, wins there. It's not even remotely out of the question for them to beat Northern Illinois at home, especially considering they won on the road last year. They've got that under their belts. And then they face Toledo. It is at Toledo, which will make it a really tough environment. But they beat the stuffing out of Toledo last year. So, and then after that, you got Central and Western. And unless they're on an absolute roll, I wouldn't anticipate winning a road game at Central and then even beating Western Michigan at home.
I'm not really seeing an easy win on the schedule, but like you said, Ball State's the team that's gonna. Ball State's doing the thing that Akron should be doing. They piss people off. That's right. If you're reading the screen, it says NIU underdogs.
Yeesh.
Do you want to know why?
Why, Alex?
Because on the over-unders, you should always take the under for NIU because that offense stank. I'm not even looking at stats yet, but what did those stats say for NIU's offense? Actually, don't tell me the stats. You're a reporter. You know words. You know stories.
Sure.
You covered the team.
I did.
I want you to tell me why NIU. Just tell me why NIU.
NIU is often inevitable, but last year they weren't. And that team struggled with its identity last year. They went with a transfer quarterback after having a quarterback who'd been in place for a couple of years. They didn't have the type of talent and cohesiveness in the passing game that they really needed to be successful, like with someone like Ross Bowers. And despite the type of arm that Bowers had, they just did not have the type of chemistry among the wide receiver group or really the talent. And a year removed from that, they lose somebody like a Spencer Tiers who was a remarkable athletic receiver, but never had the cohesiveness with Bowers. Now you're in a situation where Bowers is coming back with someone like Daniel Crawford, who could be the best pass-catching receiver or the best pass-catching tight end in the MAC. Cole Tucker, who was Ross Bowers' go-to guy, made some really big catches against Miami and Ohio. They've got young receivers that they seem to think are going to be a lot better than what they had last year, but it remains to be seen whether it's actually there. The running back group's super young. They've got Aaron Collins coming in. He's kind of like one of those guys that a lot of their success might hinge on how much potentially, if the run game takes a step up or if it stays where it's at. If it steps up from last year with Aaron Collins because he's more of a guy with a little more speed and shiftiness than Trey Arbison had, maybe the offense is a little more explosive, but they didn't really create those big explosive plays in the run game last year. So now they're just kind of putting guys in there who've played some but aren't special offensive line talents. They don't have experience at running back. Wide receiver's a question mark. Bowers is going to have one of the better arms in the conference, but whether they can develop that offense in year two under Eisens as the offensive coordinator is still a question.
So take everything that I just said about Eastern, about the unpredictability. I kind of say that because, there is a cohesiveness at Eastern. There's, 7 years of Creighton. Neil Nethery, 4th or 5th year, something like that. It feels like that. Feels like 5. NIU, different situation, sort of.
Yeah.
But the roster, at a quick glance, equally unpredictable, I guess.
So
I don't know.
young.
I don't know.
So incredibly young.
Does the same argument I kind of said for Eastern, does that work out for NIU, who is much more proven than EMU has ever been?
I mean, because I think NIU has talent at spots in a way that EMU doesn't, their potential's there. I think Bowers, if healthy, if on the same page as receivers, is better than nearly every other quarterback in the MAC, but that's a question, whether that's going to happen. He had multiple concussions last year. He wasn't always on the same page as receivers, but absolutely has the talent to do that. Whether he has receivers this year is a question mark. It's a question mark just like it is for Eastern. They have tools, they have pieces, but there's nothing, there's so much uncertainty that it's hard to be really certain that anything is going to be the case about this offense this year. I mean, defensively, Alex, did anything stick out to you from even remembering what you watched last year other than they were absolutely debilitated by injuries last year on defense?
Mostly that and just kind of the jaw-dropping experience of the team. That's mostly what sticks out to me. Mm-hmm. I know that defense was ravished by injuries. You and I, in private conversations, we had we're kind of thinking of what's the best position group in the MAC last year. In the preview time of the year, it seemed like NIU's linebackers were going to be one of the biggest strengths, not just for the team, not just for the defense, but for the entire league. It was actually a group that we really wanted to see. And then that was not the case because everyone got hurt.
Right.
Before the season, early on in the season, and then throughout. And so once that happens, I'm kind of well, okay, bye. So Kyle Pugh comes back, right?
Yeah, him and Lance DeVoe are back. Both all MAC caliber type linebackers.
Yeah.
And playing
just missing Antonio Jones-Davis, who I thought was going to be really awesome.
And he got hurt in the Ohio game.
And that was the last we heard of him, which really sucks.
Yeah. I mean, it's really unfortunate given the type of playmaker he was on defense. There really was no question he was a first-team All-MAC defender. And his season gets wiped out against Ohio. And, I mean, at that point, then you just have almost nobody in the linebacker room. That was, or at least nobody who had extensive experience. By the end of the year, you've got Nick Rattini, a walk-on from the suburbs, starting every week. But I mean, in NIU fashion, Yes, it's against Akron, but he intercepts a pass and takes it back for a touchdown and gets the shine of being the next NIU walk-on to make an impact as a starter. And NIU hangs their hat on that a lot. They love talking about how much walk-ons do for their program. And so Hammock tries to embody that. A lot of the guys that he played with were walk-ons who made their mark there.
NIU's trying to Ohio it, and I think it's kind of working out for them.
I mean, they do have that in common too, where they can, and it doesn't just make sense, but outside of AJ Roulette, like I know that's the easy pickings one for that, but they don't necessarily have to get the 3 stars every year to be successful. And then Hammock now is kind of getting some of those 3 stars that didn't normally go to NIU. He's recruiting a lot of suburban kids and Minnesota kids and Wisconsin kids, mostly Wisconsin kids more than anything.
NIU knows that they're not always going to be able to rely on recruiting 3 stars year in and year out, local, non-local. It's hard to do that at any MAC school, no matter how good or how bad your program's been over time. Toledo's been doing a very good job with it, but, at some point when the water runs dry for them, when things start turning sour at some point, they're going to have to learn how to develop guys that didn't come into their program as developed as others. And that's just a reality of the MAC. But NIU knows its reality is that it can get some 3 stars. It has gotten 3 stars. It has gotten good freshman talents. But it's better for itself to, stay committed to the hard way mentality. It's the hard way brand.
Yeah.
And to just keep running with it because, you're going to run into shit times like it has since the last 4 years, I guess, the last 5 years. Well, I mean, even though they won the MAC championship in 2018, but it hasn't felt the same, right?
Right.
There was
It's
NIU.
Crazy the expectations they've developed for the program.
There was NIU, and then there's what happened to NIU since then, and this is kind of what's happened to NIU since then, which isn't that bad. I mean, sure, last year was terrible, but like all things considered, you had a real dynasty. You did it without all the 3 stars before. We're just kind of finding out a little bit how hard it is to keep it going. But credit to NIU, where to where they deserve it, because I think they've made the right hires based off of its own experiences with Hammock. I think he can still, maybe he can help the team break through. I don't know, but there's a lot that they have to prove. They've proven it with other coaches.
Yeah, and I mean, it's still going to be another development year. You aren't looking at this team and going, wow, look at what they've got here. Look at what they've got here. They've got pieces that people should be excited about. But outside of that, like, there's nothing that you look at with NIU and go, just, man, it blows my mind how good NIU is going to be at this and this and this. When you tune into NIU this year, I mean, if they're winning games, they're probably winning it the hard way. They're probably not.
They're winning it with low scores.
They're not going to blow anybody away. If you're NIU, you're hoping like, holy crap, hopefully a year of so the extra time we got this offseason helps us with the defensive backs, because boy, are they thin there in terms of experience.
Corner.
Yeah. I mean, Dylan Thomas, who is a fifth string safety behind a bunch of seniors last year, was a starting cornerback for the last half of the season. And he's basically the leader of the defensive backs groups. They do have talent at the defensive back spots at a young age. It's just a matter of how quick can they acclimate and how much are they used this year, because I know they get that extra year of eligibility, but do you want 6? I don't know, how much do you want to expose those young defensive backs with zero experience?
Home against Buffalo, home against Central, at Ball State, at Western, home against Toledo, at EMU to finish the year. NIU, I just don't know where to gauge them. I really just don't.
Right. The thing is like, I would absolutely expect them to be more put together. I don't see more than 2 wins on the schedule that looks like, oh, they should win this game. It still wouldn't shock me if they found a way to win 3, but I just don't think it would be smart of me to predict more than 2 wins.
Yep, I'm not seeing more than 2. Not seeing more than 1, honestly.
Yep.
And it's still hard to find the 1, because the 2 teams that you would expect NIU to maybe get a win within the division, at Ball State, at EMU, not easy,
Right.
I know home field advantage is like kind of not really a thing, and especially in the MAC and especially in 2020. Yeah, it's just hard to find more than 2 wins here. It really is. And yeah, that's just it. It's just hard to find more than 2 wins here.
Yep. Let's light a candle and talk about Toledo.
The Rockets, they're the team that you always should be picking in the West to win, right? They lead the MAC in, I don't know, first place picks every year for whatever reason, I guess. I was part of that too. And guess how many times we've been right this decade? Once,
yeah.
And so that's kind of the thing, part of that dynasty that NIU's had has been in large part because they've been able to beat Toledo. Toledo's always been able to recruit incredibly well within the state, within Detroit, within other metro parts of Michigan, within Florida. It's gotten out to Pittsburgh, gotten out to Pennsylvania. Toledo's done a very good job for itself. What the hell? I really don't know how to talk about Toledo very much because it's just, should we get excited or should we be like prepared for the letdown? Like what is, I don't know how to pulse check here.
After looking at the end of last year and just how listless they were at times, to have as early of a beatdown as they got at the hands of Ball State in the MAC slate, and then to kind of recover a bit, win some games, put them in a position where they could win a MAC championship if they take care of business. They just don't, and then look listless of doing it. Is there a motivation there? Like, is there a fire under their ass? Is there an explosion under their rocket propellers? Like, what are we looking at here? Are we looking at a team that is like going to take the step of being like good from the get-go and carry it on last year or this year? Kendall didn't want to talk about the quarterback position, but like every coach, they're like, yeah, there's a quarterback battle because they want to.
Oh yeah, there's always a battle.
They're going to have a really solid offensive line like Toledo does. They'll have some solid spots on defense of guys who are like really high-level players who have pro caliber, just because there's always, it feels like every other year there's not like somebody who is super dominant, but just somebody who is good enough on the defense to like, they were a highly recruited guy or a pretty solid recruit.
Yeah, when I think of Toledo, I don't think of defense, but
right.
They have some cachet over there. Like, Oladany is doing just fine in the NFL.
Yeah, they just tend to have pretty solid defenders along some point of line, and that's not going to be what wins them games, but if they have a solid quarterback spot this year and that's figured out and they're not rotating quarterbacks every game. Kovac obviously comes back as one of the better running backs in the conference.
Mm-hmm.
His running style entertains me. I'll just pull up videos and just watch how he navigates past the offensive line, like what his cuts look like.
Yeah, it's pretty smooth.
Let's see. Like somebody like Nick Rossi was like a really cool story last year. They've got 2 brothers on the team, Nick and Drew, if I'm remembering correctly.
Mm-hmm.
But all those things considered, I don't know that you're looking at a team that should be expected to win the West, but they're always like, if things go the right way, it's absolutely not out of the question at any point. Like, if somebody says, if I think Toledo can win the West, you're like, yep. If somebody tells me I think Toledo absolutely will win the West, I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, they're hard. It's just, I don't know, man. Like, oh, you think so? Okay, how much money are you willing to put on that?
Something about.
Yeah, exactly. Like that's always a situation where like, hey, it's a good thing these predictions are for free because
like if somebody makes somebody says they'll do something on social media if Toledo loses a certain amount of games.
Yeah, like one of those scenarios. Not that that ever happens.
No, that doesn't happen.
Yeah, you bring up the quarterback thing. Quarterbacks have always been, good at Toledo. Sometimes not so much. Last year, that might be the reason why they were pretty bad. This year, it's going to be some returner, and he better be good. Do you think it's going to be one of the guys that you just said that we've seen before, or do you think they're going to dig down and be like, hey, DeQuan Finn, your turn? Hey, someone else that's...
I don't know anything about DeQuan Finn other than like he had some attention his way.
He's from Detroit, which means he's good.
Oh yeah, NIU's a quarterback is a Flint kid, one of their new guys that they're kind of hoping is the quarterback of the future in Dustin Fletcher. So, I don't know anything about Finn. Do you know anything about Finn?
DeQuan Finn, he's from Detroit, and he was actually supposed to go to Central at first, and then he flipped his commitment last minute during his recruiting process. And he was a big get. Kai was excited at the time to see where things take him. It's now a couple years later, this is about the time where I'm like, okay, time to check back in. How are things going now that you redshirted after your freshman year? How are things going? So it's just going to be, it's just one of those things where it's interesting to see how and if they use him at all. Eli Peters, not a fan. I don't know. Eli Peters, there was just something missing in Toledo's game with Eli Peters throwing the ball. I think Carter Bradley, he was a big recruit before DeQuan Finn got there. I think probably the year before. Big arm from somewhere in Florida, probably Tampa. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, one of the higher recruits they got in recent years.
Yeah, Elite 11 kid. But if you look at the stats, you would say Carter Bradley sucks. But if you watch the film, you would say, no, Carter Bradley was in a sucky situation, and he's very young. And this kid is good, just not yet. Or he has a lot of ability, just hasn't, put it together with a game plan and leading a team and all that stuff. He's someone that, again, like Finn, I'm keeping tabs on to see, let's see where his development goes. I don't know. I'm just kind of curious to see, how much playing time this guy gets. I like his ceiling more than I like Eli Peters. I think that you might be able to win more games with Peters or with Bradley than you would Peters. That's just my guess. But again, I'm not there watching them play football and practice every day. So what the hell do I know?
If the max, if Carter Bradley reaches near his potential this year, that's better than Eli Peters could be at beating his potential.
Yes. Yeah.
So
yeah, I feel like if we would have seen if Eli Peters was better than what he's shown, we would have seen it. But Toledo, I mean, they're still so loaded outside of it. If they can just get the guy that can be a consistent quarterback, they'll be pretty damn good because they're so damn talented across the board. Time to look at the schedule. The schedule. 8:00 kickoff against Bowling Green at home. Can they erase the memory or erase the bad taste out of their fans' mouths from the loss last year? Oh boy.
You would certainly hope so in a home game to start the season. If you can't get it up for that.
Against Bowling Green, come on. Home against Bowling Green, at Western, at Eastern, home against Ball State, at NIU, home against Central. You could see 6-0 because it's Toledo. You could see 3-3 because last year was a thing. Let's see. What is the real win total I should give them, though? Well, they're clearly going to lose at Eastern, and they might lose at home to Central. I really think that Central and Western, I feel like, might be the two losses if they lose two.
Sure.
And you kind of joke. I mean, it sounded like I was joking about the Eastern thing. That's not a real joke. I mean, how much better has that series been in the last few years?
Yeah, they've played close games.
Since 2016, really things have been totally different between these two schools. Saying Eastern's going to beat Toledo, that's not far-fetched.
I mean, they had an overtime game, right? They had a what was it, 29-23 game? Am I thinking of the right game? Or something along those lines. It's fairly common now for them to play games like 33-30 or like 27-26, something.
Well, there was the 2016. It was 20-15.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Toledo has won almost every matchup since 1998. Eastern has beaten Toledo only 4 times. So it's not like Eastern's totally changed the script here, but relative to the past blowouts, 2016 was just a 15-point game, 35-20. 2017 was 20-15. 2018, Eastern won by 2, 28-26. And 2019, Toledo won by 3 in overtime. And it was that. Oh my God, the weather in that game was so bad. 4-2 might be in the cards. 6-0 might be in the cards, but you just have to really prove yourself in the first. This is a real marathon. I'm kind of we're kind of underselling it, but if NIU starts figuring things out, if Ball State is better than we're advertising it, it's going to be tough to finish the slate out that way. But if Ball State and NIU play down to the levels that they kind of sat at last year, then yeah, I could see NIU finishing or Toledo finishing strong here. But you don't want to finish the season against Central. That for whatever reason,
No,
you just don't want to do it.
I mean, I'm sitting it mentally at 3-3, knowing fully well that they could just as easily win 5 games. Let's get to Western.
Why should we trust Tim Lester at this point? Like, why should we trust him?
Well, I mean, Western fans sure don't trust him.
I mean, the ones that we talk to certainly don't.
Right. Every year they've got the talent. That's been the case now for what have they had? They've won six consecutive winning seasons, I believe. Obviously dating back to Row the Boat, Flag years, and since then they've maintained the talent. They've recruited Michigan well. They've recruited the Illinois, like Chicago suburbs well. They get some kids from all over, and they churn out some NFL caliber players on the offensive line, at the skill positions, a couple defenders. They've got a couple defensive line guys that are as good as anybody in the conference. So, I mean, we're looking at a Western Michigan team that should, again, expect to be in a MAC championship game competing for a chance to win. But, I mean, do they fall apart again? Do they let it slip through their fingers? They had everything in their hands last year and just let it fall away at NIU on the road.
At first, I kind of felt like a lot of Western fans may have put too much pressure on themselves, with the 2016 run. They got the taste of it, and they're like, this is what everything could look like. And they all understood that all this could and will end, and it did. And then they hired an alumnus in Tim Lester to replace PJ Fleck and everything that he built up at Western, even though he took everything over to Minnesota. What didn't leave was the passion for brown and gold football. Western's a good team. Western's very talented. And one thing that I was very impressed with, Lester knew exactly how to recruit and did an incredible job, and has still done a very good job there, which is why Western is still good, and which is why we still have to very strongly consider this team year in and year out. The thing is, this year, aside from everything else that's gone on, the roster has experienced a lot of turnover in very incredibly important positions, such as quarterback.
Right.
The Western Hive has been clamoring for Kaleb Ellaby, and I don't blame them. Kaleb Ellaby is freaking awesome. I like Kaleb Ellaby a lot. I'm jealous Kaleb Ellaby is on the Western roster. Good. I'm very excited to see him play. We just don't know what the full season of him looks like yet, and that's always the problem with new starters, right? Especially when they get it to this level. So just thinking of it in those lenses, it's going to be kind of intriguing just to see how he deals with any bad times when they come up, because they will. Yeah, I think Western, they're going to have to play a lot of deep ball, but they probably have the quarterback to do it. It's just, can he do it at the college level now?
It sounds dumb to say. I'm not concerned about Western's offense. I'm not concerned about Western's defense. It's just, will they win the games that they're supposed to down the stretch? There's so many fun aspects of this Western team, and it's just I look at the type of talent they've gathered and what type of strides they made defensively last year, and it's they could easily be a favorite.
We are at Akron, home against Toledo, at CMU, home against NIU, home against EMU, at Ball State to finish the year. If Ball State and EMU are bottom feeders, like most people assume that they're going to be, easy last third of the schedule to go through, especially if NIU hasn't figured things out. Might be good there. The Akron game, hey, I love cookies.
Zip.
They just have to prove themselves in weeks 2 and 3. That's all there is to it. And if they don't win those games, there's see ya.
Yeah, there's no pathway to a title game berth. Yeah, I mean, I think they're my favorite team roster-wise, and I think there's a good chance they're by committee at running back. They've got a bunch of talent at wide receiver. They've got guys who are super talented on the defense end, like I've already said, and they've made such strides there. They're still okay in my mind if they lose one of those games between Toledo and Central. I think the rest of the schedule shakes out pretty well in their favor that they can win out. Even if they lose in the third game, which is Central, not Toledo, right?
The third game is Central, not Toledo.
Is
correct.
Central, okay. So even if they
Akron,
lose,
Toledo, Central.
okay, so even if they start 2-0, lose to Central, I still see it being likely they win out, even if Ball State and NIU are playing decent football. I think that's entirely plausible. But I mean, I can see.
It's just hard to like lean on a tiebreaker at that point, though.
Yeah, I think Central has their own faults, but also is ridiculously talented and is really well coached. So, how it comes down to that, like, could it be a de facto MAC West championship game in week 3? Yeah, it could be, but
Could be.
I don't think we'll know anything for certain until like week 5 because there's too much at play and too many factors to that still could pop up.
Absolutely. I'm saying, yeah, because it's hard to it's hard to bet that this team's going to go 4-2 until you remember it's Western. So that means it makes it easier. I'm going to go 4-2.
I'm willing to go 5-1.
That's fair. I'm willing to go as low as 3-3, but yeah, I think I feel safe saying 4-2 for Western. All right. I guess we got to finish things off. We're done putting them off. The Central Michigan Chippewas.
I mean, the type of turnaround Central made last year still just kind of blows me away. And not that teams can't make short turnarounds in this conference. We obviously saw what good coaches and an influx of talent can do at a place like Western in a very short amount of time. Ohio built itself up over the course of a couple of years from the doldrums of the MAC to a winning program with great consistency under Solich. But what Central did last year is just flabbergasting to me even still. Like, I don't have the mindset that if a good now fired SEC coach takes a job at Akron next year, that they're just going to like win 8 games next year. No,
but Akron's not in a position where it normally wins 8 games anyways. Like, Central has already won.
So, and I agree that the tradition is there and like the foundation was there, but there was so little talent on that team, or at least developed talent on. I mean, that was so horrendous to watch Central Michigan football in 2018. That offense was putrid. Yeah, but that's not the roster's fault. That's the coach's fault. Why would you take someone who is very clearly a generational talent at tight end for Central Michigan and say, that's a dual threat quarterback. That's a quarterback.
And people are like, oh man, well, we got to learn how to make big people into good quarterbacks. No, you don't. That's why.
He's got big hands. We're putting him at quarterback.
So? Oh, he can see over the line. Yeah, so can like 5'6" dudes.
He's an NFL. So you're saying these people are NFL talent scouts. Got it. Okay.
Yeah, like it was just the wrong move, and you end up doing that, and you have the worst offense in school history. You put that guy in a position that he's better suited for. You make him believe in that. You make others believe in that too. And guess what? You have a division-winning year.
One of the best improved teams in college football, all of college football period last year, if not the most. All things considered, probably the most improved team in college football.
All things considered, not the most impressive turnaround. All things considered, still happened.
I mean, you're just not going to have teams win 7 more games. It just doesn't. It does not happen very often. You get it like, oh, it happened in the Sun Belt 3 years ago, or oh, it happened in the Mountain West like 7 years ago. So something comes to mind like Fresno State going from like a 2 or 3 win team to a 10-win team. Somebody like Louisiana making quick strides in a couple of years. Who's done that? You should be
thinking of your rival school because they went from worst to first to start the decade off. Happened.
It did happen.
And that was a more impressive turnaround, I believe. But, the Central one, they still, I don't know, like the MAC just wasn't that great. It was just overall just not a good year for the MAC, and that's kind of why I'm downplaying it. Again, the turnaround still happened. I mean, you still went from being a locker room that lived with the fact that you were in a one-win team one year, and then you go to Detroit the next year. Like, you did something that people did not expect to see happen. And at the same time, I'm not all too surprised because Central has, like I said, had that cachet. Yeah, the players have essential belief that, oh, bad pun, they have essential belief that what they do at Central, can be done well. And because they've seen, over the years that Central's gone to bowl games over these years. They haven't had the best teams, the best rosters in the MAC, but they've had, some very scrappy units. They've had whatever identity
Oklahoma
that they've
State
all
on
bought
the
into
road
over the years has remained true at Central. And it's kind of somehow, in a weird way, lasted through the coaching legacies, through like Dan Enos, through Bonamego, and now in through Jim McElwain, where there's some sort of attitude at Central Michigan that can somewhat be identified that's still kind of there. And as long as that, whatever attitude they play with that has been sticking around for years, that's why they keep having winning seasons, right?
Yeah, and I mean, for those same reasons, it's the same exact thinking of why I would expect Central to have 3 more 10-win seasons before I would ever expect them to have another 1-win season.
Yeah, absolutely.
You just don't expect them to be non-competitive in the MAC.
Yeah, and I could see Central being, I could see Jim McElwain being the good luck charm for Central that Frank Solich is for Ohio, where it might not be a championship winning performance any of these years or every year, but you're going to get a team that plays its ass off, that gets to a bowl game, and you're going to like it.
You're going to like what you see on the football field. I guarantee it.
I mean, do you like what you see? I mean, if you're an Ohio fan, you get bowl games every year because of Solich. Do you like what you see there?
It's the type of thing where you realize more in hindsight or after experience how good it is to be in a position where you're making those types of games every year and rooting for a winning team. I can tell you, from the college student experience, you're thinking they've hit a wall, they've hit the ceiling, they're not going to get any better. They should hire better because they're capable of doing that now. But it seems like such an asinine thing to think now that Solich should have been fired at any point. So if you're Central, you're winning 8 games every year. I mean, the way they work, if McElwain up and left after this year, they're going to hire somebody who's got a good background and can either recruit the area or has got a way to continue on the foundation. So they're back. I mean, a year removed from an awful season, they're back on the footing. And I think you would argue that they never really left the solid footing. They just made some bad choices and had a year that was an aberration.
Yeah, exactly. Because most of that roster, they were playing with most of the roster that Bonamego recruited over the past couple of years,
Right.
And it's not like the talent mostly left. When Bonamego got hired in after Dan Enos left at the nth hour of the day to be, what was he? He was the offensive coordinator for Arkansas, I think it was. Players didn't leave. The recruits, in large part, I don't think they had any decommits after that. I think they all stuck around.
He also
and of course, by now they're all graduated,
too.
But
he also did it really late too. If you remember, the move that Enos made was really bad timing wise for a lot of recruits.
Yeah, and it's not like recruits are had enough flexibility to say no, we want out of our Illinois or blah blah blah. But they, it's hard to restart the recruiting process after that. But I digress. It's still an opportunity for kids to say screw it, we're not going there. But they did. They all bought in and they stuck around and they all, for the most part, I believe, graduated. I don't think many of them transferred out. And like I said, it's that same mentality that the players stick around in the locker room and they talk with and they hang out with and they all buy into with. And Bonamego wasn't a world beater in recruiting, but he did a good job at, keeping things local. He got in-state kids excited to play for Central Michigan. What more could you really want at that point?
In Mount Pleasant, of all the places.
And he's gotten some of them, McElwain too, some of those Detroit kids and in-state kids to be instant impacts for the Chippewas.
Yeah.
And honestly, like, what more could you really want? Like, you shouldn't be too excited at that, or not too excited, but you shouldn't be too surprised that they ever made it to Detroit because of that. You shouldn't be surprised that, that they were able to put on an 8-win season in 2019. You should just really just be like, yeah, I mean, they made some really, really poor choices along the way, and that's why they had a 1-win season. It wasn't because they had a bad roster. They just didn't have good coaches.
Yeah. And so it's a long way of getting at they still, I mean, Alex, they return the type of talent that leads you to believe that, I mean, I think they're your MAC favorite. I mean, defensively, what sticks out to you the most about the guys that this group brings back? Because that's still their identity, right?
The defense, the one thing that they need to turn around there, they just need to be better in the pass game. They need to be better in pass D. I think that they were one of the worst teams in the MAC in that regard last year. But, I mean, other than that, I think they'll be fine. Like, I thought losing Mike Dana would be such a big deal last year. Yeah. Turns out Sean Adesanya was really good in his place.
Good Lord, yeah. I mean,
Sean Adesanya's gone.
The type of guy you're thinking of, both like Troy Brown and Adesanya as like MAC Defensive Player of the Year type players last year. That's how good they were at times.
For sure. Yeah, but now Adesanya's gone.
Right.
How do they replace him? Like, they did it the one time. Now how do they do it the second time? They'll probably be fine.
Yeah, defensive line wise, I think they're still gonna be fine based on what I couldn't tell you much about the defensive line, but as far as the depth chart, the type of experience they bring back, like, there's no reason for me to believe like that front seven is going to be anything but fine. It's just what you've already pointed out, the defensive secondary. And then maybe the defensive line's still good enough that the secondary doesn't have to be world beaters.
Yup. All right, let's check out the defending West champ schedule. Home against Ohio, at NIU, home against Western, at Eastern, home against Ball State, at Toledo. Again, kind of, it feels like Toledo's schedule where this thing's a marathon. Ohio, NIU, those two teams are going to give you a run for their money. We don't really know how we feel about them, but competitive nonetheless. Eastern, Western, right there in the middle. Again, they want to kick your ass. Ball State, hey, man, I don't think Ball State's going to beat Central at all. But if Ball State's going to be good, I mean, this would be a good time for Ball State to put literally everything together. And Toledo, you don't really want to face them, especially if they're going to be as talented as we made them out to be.
Right.
Don't want to finish the season at Toledo either, but
no,
that's the reality.
Unless Toledo's given up at that point.
It's just so hard, man. Like, Central's just – they impressed me so much last year. I just dare to say anything bad this time.
I don't
feel like getting gassed.
I'm very strongly in 4-2 in the 4-2 camp.
Who are your two losses?
I think.
Well, Eastern and the other one.
God damn it! I mean, I'm looking at Toledo produced at Toledo as the one they lose, and then I don't know if it's. I mean, I don't necessarily think that Western is like a shoe-in to beat them, but I think probably either Western or Ball State gets them as the other game.
All right, Caleb. Let's go bottom up. Let's go bottom up here. Who's eating the dirt in the MAC West?
At this point, I think it's EMU. I think EMU has too much to prove, finds a way to win a game, possibly two. And I just don't see much in the way of upside after that. I think it's between NIU and EMU as far as who is in the position to only win one game or no games. But I actually don't think there's a scenario where either of those teams don't win a game. I just think they're both one-win teams, essentially.
I'm assuming Ball State's third or fourth, rather.
So I'm in a situation for me where Ball State is going to be just still slightly better than NIU. It's hard for me to envision EMU or NIU consistently racking up the wins there. What about you? Who's at the bottom for you?
All right, so I'm going to give you my bottom two, and I'm going to say Northern Illinois is at the bottom. Look, I can believe in you guys. I just got to see it first, all right? And I saw a little bit of Ball State, which is why I'm putting them a little bit above you. And if you don't like it, you shouldn't have lost last year. It's just as simple as that. And that's where I'm going to stop for now. I want you to finish up your picks.
Oh, goody! I'm loving where this is going. So again, we've had this discussion. I think the top three in the West, you could make a good case for any of them. I think a good Ball State team could like even be in contention to win it in the last week. But for now, I think Toledo's your number 3 team. Central, even returning what it doesn't quite get the job done, drops a game maybe it shouldn't, and then drops the game either to Toledo at the end of the season or drops to Western. So I've got Toledo at 3, Central at 2, Western as your MAC West champ.
All right, I like your logic there. Assuming that we play
Right.
6 games, right? Assuming that a 6-game schedule totally gets played out. Knowing what we know, knowing what we've always known, how is 4 teams at 4-2 not the most realistic possibility here? How is that not the most realistic possibility? And I list them in the order of how I think things will shake out. I think 4 teams will finish 4-2. Eastern, Central, Western, Toledo. What's happening?
What is wrong with you?
What do you mean? What's wrong with you? What's wrong with you? You're
In what world is Eastern Michigan 4-2 this year?
Look around. What world is this? Why not? They're putting it all together.
How can they have it together if they don't even have what they had that was it last year?
They didn't have it last year. They have it this year. That's where you're wrong.
There's nothing that indicate they have it.
I just told you they have it.
All right. So your most unconventional pick, which isn't that convention.
It's not.
It's not that unconventional
This is
because
not
this is the Mid-American Conference where weird things happen every year. Your teams that would go 6-2 in a normal year, a quote unquote normal year, will now go 4-2 in COVID 2020 season. So yeah, that's something to consider. So the tiebreakers will be fun there, wouldn't they?
Yeah, that's why Eastern's finishing first. I don't know how it's going to shake up, but it will happen this way.
This is one of those situations where it's like you cannot lose with your predictions this year. Are we going to be cold takes exposed? No. If you're right, good Lord, you look so smart.
And if we do get cold takes exposed, we made it.
It couldn't get any more stupid than that. So whatever, makes sense to me. It'll make for some interesting storylines if we get the type of football we're hoping for.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Caleb, do we have anything else before we close out of here?
I mean, I guess just, a reminder to anybody who's paying attention to this. We're still trying to, we want you to follow on Twitter, MacFB Forever. If you're not checking this out specifically on YouTube, make sure you're subscribing to the channel on YouTube. We still want to build a community. We're trying to figure out what would work best, whether it's a message board or a server where we can get people talking about night football. Got a lot of friends who we know really care about the league and care about this and would be willing to indulge us in listening long enough to listen to an 1.5-hour long episode. So for those of you doing that, we love you guys. Alex, what else can we ask for everybody? Or what would we want anybody else to do?
I just want you to root for Eastern. I just want you to believe in them. I mean, I don't need you to settle for saying, oh, I think Toledo's going to win the West. No, you don't. You think Eastern's going to win it. It's okay.
Just some angels in the outfield.
I just need you to come to terms with that.
Just some angels in the outfield type faith. Sure.
Thank you again for listening. Catch us on the YouTube. Catch us on the Twitter. Catch us on the internet. Just join our conversations. We're going to, we're kind of like having the soft questions now of like what we want to do for Discord or, message board, whatever. You'll see more official stuff later. Bye.
See you.